Opening hook, first 30 seconds. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Honey, I made copies of the apartment keys for you. Those were the words my son Daniel said at his 5th wedding anniversary dinner, handing 3 shiny keys to his wife Victoria in front of everyone we knew. Keys to my apartment. The apartment I inherited from my sister Grace after caring for her through 5 years of cancer hell. But what Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Grace had seen this coming. Before she died, my sister left me something more powerful than just an apartment. She left me the weapons to fight back. And that night, in front of 40 guests at the Riverside Room, I was about to destroy every plan they'd made to steal my home and lock me away in a nursing home like yesterday's trash. My name is Charlotte Hayes. I'm 65 years old, and this is the story of how my own son conspired to take everything I had left and how I made sure he failed. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Cream-colored cardstock, expensive. The kind Victoria always insisted on even when they were drowning in credit card debt. You are cordially invited to celebrate Daniel and Victoria's 5th anniversary, the Riverside Room, Saturday, December 14th, 7:00 p.m. cocktail attire. I held that card in my kitchen, standing under the fluorescent light that buzzed whenever the neighbor upstairs ran his shower. My hands shook slightly. They'd been doing that more often lately, though, whether from age or stress, I couldn't tell anymore. Daniel hadn't called me in 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence after years of daily phone calls when he was younger. After years of, Mom, what should I do about this? And Mom, I need your advice. After years of him promising that he'd never abandon me like his father had. The last time we'd spoken, he'd said something that still kept me awake at nights. Mom, you need to understand I have my own life now. I can't keep supporting you forever. Supporting me. As if the 4 years I'd spent caring for his Aunt Grace, the woman who'd raised him as much as I had, was some kind of vacation. As if I'd been living it up while my sister's body slowly destroyed itself from the inside out. I set the invitation on my small kitchen table right next to the pile of medical bills I was still paying off. Grace had been dead for a year, but the debt from her final months lived on. Even with her insurance, there had been gaps. Medications not covered. Specialist visits that cost $300 out of pocket. The ambulance ride that last terrible Tuesday morning when she couldn't breathe, $800. I'd paid it all. Every penny. Because that's what you do for family. Or at least that's what I thought family did for each other. My cousin Patricia Trish, as she insisted everyone call her, had been strangely attentive in those final months. Trish, who'd spent 40 years looking down her nose at Grace and me, suddenly showing up at the apartment with expensive flower arrangements and concerned questions about Grace's arrangements. Have you discussed her will, Charlotte? Trish had asked one afternoon, perched on the edge of Grace's favorite reading chair, like a vulture eyeing roadkill. It's so important to have these things in order. You wouldn't want any confusion after she's gone. Grace had been in the bedroom too weak to get up, but I'd seen her eyes flash when she heard Trish's voice. Later, when I brought her dinner soup she could barely swallow, she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. Lottie, she'd whispered. Grace was the only person who still called me that. Don't trust her. Don't trust any of them. Grace, you're being paranoid. Promise me. Her eyes, sunken and ringed with dark circles, burned with an intensity that made my breath catch. Promise me you'll fight. When the time comes, promise me. I'd promised. I'd held my sister's hand and promised her I'd be strong. I just hadn't known then what I'd be fighting against. Now, standing in my kitchen with that cream-colored invitation, I felt something twist in my gut. Instinct. The same instinct that told you when a storm was coming, or when you'd left the stove on, or when someone was lying to your face with a smile. Something was wrong. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Hey, Mom. His recorded voice was cheerful, energetic. The voice of the son I used to know. Can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back. He wouldn't. I knew he wouldn't, but I left a message anyway. Daniel, it's Mom. I got your invitation. I'll be there. I hope you're doing well. I miss you, honey. Call me when you can. My voice cracked on that last part. I hated how weak I sounded. How desperate. I was 65 years old, not some helpless child. I'd raised Daniel alone after his father Michael walked out when the boy was 4. I'd worked 2 jobs, receptionist at doctor, Morrison's dental practice during the day, data entry at home at night to keep us afloat. I'd helped Daniel with homework, attended every parent-teacher conference, cheered at his soccer games, even when I was so exhausted I could barely stand. I'd sacrificed everything for that boy, and now he couldn't even return my phone calls. I looked around my apartment. Grace's apartment, really. I still thought of it that way, even though it had been legally mine for a year. The lease Grace had signed decades ago, back when this neighborhood was affordable. Rent stabilized, thank God, which meant I paid $900 a month instead of the $3,000 these apartments went for now. The walls were still painted the soft cream color Grace had chosen. Her books lined the shelves in the living room, classics, poetry, mystery novels she'd collected over a lifetime of teaching. Photographs covered the walls, Grace and me as children under that oak tree back in Connecticut. Grace at her college graduation. Grace and me with Daniel when he was small, his gap-toothed grin lighting up the frame. That little boy had loved his Aunt Gracie. He'd clung to her legs when she came to visit, demanded she read him stories, saved his best artwork from school to show her. What had happened to him? Or more accurately, what had Victoria done to him? I'd liked Victoria at first. She'd seemed good for Daniel, ambitious, polished, confident, in ways my shy son had never been. She worked in marketing for some international firm, wore designer clothes, always knew the right wine to order at restaurants. But Grace had seen through her immediately. That woman has snake eyes, Grace had told me one night about 6 months before she died. She'd been having a good day, strong enough to sit up in bed, and we'd been looking at photos from Daniel and Victoria's engagement party. Look at this picture, Lottie. Really look at her. I'd studied the photo. Victoria in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her arm around Daniel's waist, smiling at the camera. Her teeth were perfect. Her makeup was flawless. Her eyes didn't match her smile. She looks happy to me, I'd said, not wanting to believe what Grace was suggesting. She looks like someone who just closed a business deal. Grace had set the photo down on her nightstand with a dismissive flick of her wrist. Mark my words, little sister. That woman didn't marry Daniel for love. She married him for what she thinks he'll give her. Grace, that's harsh. I'm dying, Lottie. I don't have time for politeness anymore. She'd smiled then, that sad, knowing smile that broke my heart every time. I hope I'm wrong. For Daniel's sake, I really hope I'm wrong. She hadn't been wrong. 3 days after that conversation, I'd overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. It was a Thursday afternoon. Daniel had come to visit one of his increasingly rare visits, and I'd stepped out to pick up Grace's prescriptions from the pharmacy downstairs. I'd forgotten my phone and had to come back up. I'd opened the apartment door quietly, not wanting to wake Grace if she was sleeping. Daniel's voice had carried from the living room, sharp with frustration. I know, Victoria, but I can't just tell Mom to put her in a hospice facility. Not yet. Silence. He was on the phone. Because it's too soon, she'll know something's wrong. First I need to convince her that Grace would be better off with professional care, that Mom can't handle it anymore. My hand had frozen on the doorknob. Yes, I talked to Aunt Trish. She says once Grace passes, we can petition for guardianship. If we can show Mom's not mentally fit to live alone. She's over 60, hasn't worked in years, spent all her time caring for a terminal patient. Any judge would... I'd dropped my keys. The clatter had echoed in the hallway. Daniel had appeared in the living room doorway, his face pale. Mom, I forgot my phone. My voice had sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from underwater. What were you talking about, Daniel? Nothing, just work stuff. Conference call. He'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. Victoria's smile. How's Aunt Grace? Sleeping. I'd walked past him into the apartment, not trusting myself to look at him. You should go. I'm sure you're busy. Mom? Go, Daniel. He'd left, and I'd stood in the middle of Grace's living room, shaking so hard I'd had to sit down on the floor. Guardianship. Mentally unfit. Petition. My own son was planning to have me declared incompetent. I'd crawled to Grace's bedroom door, pushed it open quietly. She was awake, watching me with those knowing eyes. You heard, she'd said. Not a question. I'd nodded, unable to speak. Come here, Lottie. I'd gone to her bedside and she'd taken my hand in both of hers. Her skin was paper-thin, bruised from all the IV needles, but her grip was strong. Listen to me very carefully, Grace had said. In my closet top shelf, there's a manila envelope. Don't open it until after I'm gone, after the funeral. Do you understand? Grace, what? Promise me, Charlotte. Promise me you won't open it until after the funeral. I promise. Good. She'd closed her eyes, exhausted from the effort of speaking. It's all there. Everything you need. I've taken care of it, little sister. I've taken care of everything. At the time, I hadn't understood what she meant. Now, a year later, standing in this apartment that Daniel wanted to steal from me, I understood perfectly. Grace had known. Somehow she'd known exactly what was coming, and she'd left me the weapons to fight back. To understand how I got here, to understand why Grace left me what she did, you need to know our story, Grace and me, the Hayes sisters. We grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a small house with thin walls and a backyard where Grace planted orange geraniums that bloomed impossibly bright every summer. Our father worked construction. Our mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families in the nicer neighborhoods, coming home with her knees aching and her hands raw from bleach. Grace was 8 years older than me, which meant she'd been my second mother for as long as I could remember. While our parents worked dawn to dusk, Grace braided my hair with pink ribbons she bought with her allowance. She taught me to read under that oak tree in our yard, using her finger to trace the words in books she'd borrowed from the public library. "Sound it out, Lottie," she'd say patiently when I stumbled over a difficult word. "You can do it. You're so smart." When kids at school made fun of my patched clothes hand-me-downs from the church donation box, Grace would appear like an avenging angel. She never raised her hand to anyone, but she had a way of looking at bullies that made them shrink back. "Nobody touches my little sister," she'd say, her voice quiet but absolute. Nobody. Our family was small but close, or at least I'd thought we were close. We had our cousin Patricia Trish, who lived in Hartford with her mother, my mom's sister. Trish would visit twice a year, always dressed in clothes that were just a little too fancy for our humble home, talking about her life in the city with an air of superiority that made Grace's jaw tighten. Trish had always been jealous of Grace, jealous of her natural beauty, her intelligence, the way everyone in town respected her. Grace didn't need expensive dresses or perfect makeup to shine. She had something Trish would never possess, no matter how much money she spent: genuine dignity. I remember one summer afternoon when I was 12. Trish had arrived for her annual visit in a lilac dress and high heels that were completely impractical for our gravel driveway. She'd perched herself in our living room, which suddenly looked shabby in comparison to her outfit, and launched into a monologue about her wonderful life. The parties she attended, the important men who courted her, the restaurants where she dined. Grace had listened in silence, peeling potatoes for dinner at the kitchen table. Finally, Trish had turned to her with a saccharine smile. "And you, Grace, still here taking care of your little sister, still living in this quaint little place." Grace had set down her peeler, wiped her hands on her apron, and met Trish's eyes with that steady, unshakable gaze. "I live where my family is, Patricia, and that's worth more than all your designer dresses combined." Trish's smile had frozen. Her eyes had hardened with something ugly. She never forgave Grace for that answer, never forgave my sister for having something money couldn't buy. The years passed. Grace fulfilled her dream of becoming an elementary school teacher. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through college, waitressing at night, tutoring on weekends, working the library desk between classes. She graduated summa cum laude and got a position at Jefferson Elementary in Manhattan, teaching 3rd grade. I married young. Too young, probably. Michael Hayes seemed charming at 23, tall, handsome, with big dreams about starting his own contracting business. We married when I was 25, and Daniel was born when I was 29. For 4 years, we were happy. Or at least I thought we were happy. Then, one January morning before the sun came up, I woke to find Michael's side of the bed empty. His duffel bag was gone. His work boots were gone. On the kitchen table, he'd left a note written on the back of a gas station receipt. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." That was it. 15 words to end a marriage. 15 words to abandon his 4-year-old son. I sat at that kitchen table until sunrise, holding that receipt in my shaking hands, listening to Daniel call out from his bedroom, "Mommy, is Daddy making breakfast?" I didn't know how to tell him, didn't know how to explain that Daddy wasn't making breakfast, that Daddy wasn't there, that Daddy had decided his family was too much trouble and walked away without even saying goodbye. I was still sitting there paralyzed when my apartment buzzer rang at 7:30 a.m. It was Grace. 2 suitcases at her feet, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a warm sweater. "I'm here to help with Daniel," she'd said simply, as if she hadn't just abandoned her own apartment in Manhattan, her stable job, her comfortable life, just to rescue me from my disaster. Grace moved in with us that day. She stayed for 2 full years. She took care of Daniel while I fell apart, while I cried myself to sleep every night, while I stared at the walls and wondered how I was going to survive as a single mother with no college degree and a stack of bills Michael had left behind. Grace got me a job as a receptionist at Dr. Morrison's dental practice. She watched Daniel during my shifts. She helped him with his preschool homework. She read him stories before bed, the same stories she'd once read to me under that oak tree. Daniel adored his Aunt Gracie. He'd wait by the window for her to come home from substitute teaching gigs, then run to hug her legs the moment she walked through the door. Aunt Gracie, guess what I learned today?" And Grace would scoop him up, swing him around, listen to his excited chatter about letters and numbers and the frog he'd seen at the park. She taught him values I was too depressed and exhausted to instill. She taught him about kindness, about respect, about what it meant to be a good man. "Real men protect the women they love, Daniel," she'd tell him while he sat on her lap, his small hands playing with her necklace. "They don't abandon them. They don't walk away when things get hard. Promise me you'll never be like your father." And Daniel, my sweet little boy, with his gap-toothed smile and enormous brown eyes, would nod solemnly. "I promise, Aunt Gracie, when I grow up I'm going to work really hard and buy Mommy a huge house with a pool and a puppy." Grace would hug him tight, her eyes meeting mine over his head, and in that moment I'd feel like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. I believed him. We both believed him. That little boy had a pure heart. What happened to that child? At what point did he become the man who would betray me in the cruelest way possible? Grace never married. She said she'd never met anyone who could compete with her real love teaching. For 30 years, she shaped young minds at Jefferson Elementary. Her students adored her. Parents requested her specifically. She won Teacher of the Year 3 times. And she saved. Every penny she could, Grace saved. She lived modestly. A small rent-stabilized apartment in the Bronx that she'd had since her 20s. She shopped at thrift stores. She packed her lunch instead of eating out. She didn't take expensive vacations or buy designer clothes. She saved because she had a dream to own a home. Something that was truly hers. Something nobody could take away. When Grace turned 55, she finally had enough for a down payment. She found an apartment in a building on Lincoln Avenue, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony overlooking a pocket park, hardwood floors that creaked when you walked barefoot on cold mornings. It wasn't fancy. The neighborhood was transitioning, as real estate agents like to say, but it was hers. The day she signed the papers, Grace was radiant. I met her at the lawyer's office, and when she walked out with those keys in her hand, she looked like a woman who'd climbed Everest. "Lottie," she'd said, her voice thick with emotion, "this place will be yours someday. Everything I have is yours. You're my family, my sister, my whole life." I'd cried. Standing there on the sidewalk outside that lawyer's office, I'd cried so hard I'd gotten mascara all over Grace's nice blouse. "I don't deserve you," I'd sobbed. "I don't deserve such an amazing sister." Grace had pulled back, gripped my shoulders, looked me straight in the eyes. "You survived Charlotte. You raised Daniel alone. You worked yourself to the bone. You never gave up, not once, even when you wanted to. You deserve everything." Trish had been at the celebration that evening. Of course she had. She showed up to major family events with her forced smile and empty congratulations, her eyes always calculating, always assessing value. I'd watched her tour Grace's new apartment, touching the walls like she was testing the paint opening cabinets in the kitchen, asking pointed questions about square footage and property taxes and building regulations. "It's a lovely starter home," Trish had said, her tone making it clear she thought it was anything but lovely. "Though, of course, in this neighborhood, well, I'm sure the property values will improve eventually." Grace had smiled tightly. "It's perfect for me." "Oh, absolutely. I just meant, well, you know how I worry about family security. Have you thought about updating your will now that you own property? It's so important to have everything in order." Even then, 5 years before she got sick, Trish had been circling like a vulture. Grace had changed the subject. But later, when it was just the 2 of us cleaning up after the party, she'd said something that stuck with me. Trish isn't interested in my well-being, Lottie. She's interested in my assets. Remember that. I wish I'd paid more attention to that warning. 5 years after Grace bought her apartment, she started getting sick. At first, it was small things. Stomach pains she dismissed as stress. Fatigue she attributed to too many years teaching energetic 8-year-olds. A loss of appetite that made her clothes hang loose on her frame. By the time she finally went to the doctor, it was too late. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3B, inoperable. The oncologist had been gentle but honest, 6 months to a year, depending on how she responded to treatment. Grace had taken the news with characteristic calm. She'd asked practical questions about chemotherapy schedules and pain management and prognosis statistics. She'd taken notes in her neat teacher's handwriting. Then she'd driven to my apartment, walked through my door, and collapsed in my arms. "I'm scared, Lottie," she'd whispered. "I'm so scared." I'd held my sister and felt my world tilt on its axis. Grace strong, unshakable. Grace was going to die. I quit my job immediately. By then I was 60, close to retirement anyway. Daniel was 28, settled in his job at a tech company engaged to Victoria. He was an adult. He could take care of himself. Grace needed me. "I'll help you financially, Mom," Daniel had said when I told him my plan. He'd hugged me tight, and for a moment he was my little boy again. "Go take care of Aunt Grace. Don't worry about anything." He'd kept that promise. For 3 months. 3 months of sending me $1,200 a month to help with medical expenses and food and the 1,000 little costs that come with terminal illness. Then the money started to trickle off. 1,200 became 600. 600 became 300. Then nothing. When I called to ask what was wrong, Daniel always had excuses. Problems at work. Unexpected expenses. The wedding he was planning with Victoria was costing more than anticipated. "Mom," he'd said during one particularly tense phone call, "you need to understand that I have my own life now, my own obligations. I can't keep supporting you forever. You've been out of work for years. What's your plan? Supporting me, like I was some kind of burden, some freeloader living the high life on his charity. Not a mother who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. Not a woman who was spending 18 hours a day caring for her dying sister, the sister who'd helped raise him." "Daniel," I'd said, my voice shaking, "I'm not on vacation. I'm watching Grace die by inches. I'm cleaning her when she can't get to the bathroom. I'm holding her hair when she vomits from chemo. I know, Mom, I know, but Victoria and I are trying to build a life. We want to buy a house, start a family. We can't do that if I'm constantly He'd stopped himself, but I'd heard the end of that sentence as clearly as if he'd said it aloud. "If I'm constantly supporting you." I'd hung up without saying goodbye, and I'd gone to Grace's bedroom where she lay propped up on pillows, too weak to do more than turn her head. She'd been listening. Of course she had. These walls were thin. "It's her," Grace had whispered. "Victoria, she's poisoning him against you, pulling him away." "Grace, don't... Listen to me, Lottie." She'd reached for my hand with effort. "I need to tell you something. Something important." And that's when she told me about the envelope in her closet. Grace lived for 5 years after her diagnosis. 5 years that were supposed to be 6 months. She defied every statistic, fought through countless rounds of chemotherapy, refused to give up. But cancer doesn't care about fighting spirit. Eventually it wins. The final weeks were the hardest. Grace in constant pain despite the morphine. Her body failing system by system. Her brilliant mind trapped in a shell that was slowly shutting down. Trish started visiting more frequently in those final months, and she never came alone. She always brought Victoria. The two of them would arrive together, Trish with her designer handbag and Victoria with her perfect makeup, and they'd sit in the living room talking in low voices. Whenever I entered, they'd fall silent abruptly, smile at me with false warmth, ask how Grace was holding up. I'd started to notice them taking inventory. Victoria would photograph the apartment ostensibly to show Daniel how everything is, but I'd seen her taking pictures of the wall art, the furniture, even the view from the balcony. Trish would ask pointed questions about the building, about property values, about Grace's arrangements. "Have you discussed what happens to the apartment?" she'd asked one afternoon, her voice dripping with false concern. "These rent-stabilized leases can be tricky. You'll want to make sure everything's in order." Grace had been too weak to come out of her room, but I'd seen her jaw tighten when she heard Trish's voice through the open doorway. Victoria had been more direct. "Charlotte," she'd said one day, cornering me in the kitchen while Trish pretended to organize Grace's medications. "Have you thought about your future when this is all over? And I'm so sorry, but we have to be realistic. You'll need somewhere to live. Daniel and I have been discussing it, and we think maybe a senior living community would be perfect for you. Somewhere with nurses and activities. You'd be so much happier than trying to manage a big apartment alone." I was 61 years old, not some decrepit invalid who needed round-the-clock supervision, but the way Victoria said it with that condescending smile made it clear she'd already made decisions about my life. "This is my home," I'd said quietly. Grace left it to me. Victoria's smile had hardened. "Well, nothing's official yet, is it? We'll see what the will says." Grace died on a Sunday morning. The hospice nurse had left at midnight. I'd sent her home, told her to rest, that I'd call if anything changed. But I knew. Somehow I knew this was the end. I'd sat beside Grace's bed all night, holding her hand, talking to her, even though she was barely conscious. "Remember that oak tree in Fairfield?" I'd whispered. "Remember how you used to braid my hair with those pink ribbons? You made me feel like a Princess Grace. Every single day you made me feel special." Grace's fingers had twitched in mine. Her eyes, when they opened, were cloudy with pain and medication, but I saw recognition there. Love. "Lottie," she'd breathed. "Just my name. Nothing else." "I'm here, Grace. I'm right here. I'm not leaving." She'd smiled. That beautiful smile that had lit up my childhood, my teenage years, my entire life. "Love you," she'd whispered. "Best part of my life." And then as the sun rose and sent golden light streaming through the windows, she'd loved Grace closed her eyes for the last time. I sat there for an hour before I could bring myself to call the hospice service. Sat there holding my sister's hand, watching the light change in her bedroom, memorizing every detail of her face. Grace was gone, and I had never felt so alone in my entire life. I called Daniel at 8:30 a.m. His phone rang 6 times before he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Mom?" "What time?" "She's gone, Daniel. Grace is gone." Silence. Then, "I'll be there as soon as I can." He arrived at 11:45, 3 hours later, and he didn't come alone. Daniel walked through the door with Victoria on one arm and Trish on the other, the three of them together like some kind of united front. Daniel looked at Grace's body. The hospice service had offered to send someone immediately, but I'd asked them to wait, needing a few more hours with my sister, and his face remained impassive. No tears, no grief, just a slight tightening around his eyes. "We should arrange the funeral," he'd said mechanically. Victoria had put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. Trish had immediately started opening drawers and cabinets. "I'm looking for important documents," she'd explained when I'd stared at her in disbelief. "Will insurance policies, that sort of thing. We need to get everything in order." Get everything in order. My sister had been dead for 3 hours, and they were already looking for her paperwork. The funeral was small. Grace had outlived most of her relatives, and many of her teaching colleagues had retired and moved away. A handful of former students came, now adults, to pay their respects. Some neighbors from the building. The hospice nurse who'd been so kind in those final weeks. Trish had taken charge of the arrangements. She'd chosen the cheapest casket despite my protests. Grace would want something simple, she'd insisted. No point wasting money on someone who's gone. Wasting money. Grace had spent her entire life saving, working, building something with dignity, and Trish wanted to bury her in a cardboard box. I'd fought for a better casket. Oak with brass handles. Something that honored the woman my sister had been. I'd paid for it myself using the last of my savings. At the wake, I'd overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd been in the bathroom at the funeral home when Victoria and Trish had entered the hallway, just outside their voices carrying through the thin door. "Did you talk to the lawyer?" Victoria had asked urgently. "Yes, but he says we have to wait for the official will reading," Trish had replied, frustration sharp in her tone. Apparently, Grace had everything locked down tight. "Doesn't matter. Grace had nobody but Charlotte, and Charlotte doesn't have the legal capacity to manage property. She's too old, too. Fragile. We can argue she's not mentally fit to administer an estate." "And Daniel agrees." Victoria's laugh had been cold. "Daniel does whatever I tell him to do, Patricia. I just need to keep convincing him that his mother needs professional care. He's already halfway convinced she's losing it. They'd laughed, both of them, standing in the hallway of a funeral home laughing about their plan to destroy me. I'd stayed in that bathroom for 10 minutes after they left, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale. Dark circles shadowed my eyes. My hair, more gray than brown, now needed styling. I looked old, tired, defeated. But I wasn't defeated. I was angry. And I remembered Grace's words. Promise me you'll fight. I left that bathroom with my head held high. I stood beside Grace's casket and spoke to her silently. I'm not going to let them win, Grace. I promised you, and I keep my promises. 3 days after the funeral, I finally opened the envelope. Grace had made me promise not to open it until after the funeral, and I'd kept that promise. But now, alone in the apartment that felt too quiet without her, I went to her closet. Top shelf, she'd said. Behind the boxes of old teaching supplies she'd never quite managed to throw away. The manila envelope was thick-heavy, my name written on the front in Grace's careful teacher's handwriting, Charlotte Hayes, important. I took it to the kitchen table, made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside a letter, 5 pages front and back in Grace's handwriting, legal documents, a small digital voice recorder, a USB drive, and a business card, Arthur Goldstein, attorney at law. I started with the letter. My dearest Lottie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Please don't cry for me. I had a wonderful life because of you. You were the best part of everything, little sister. But now I need you to be strong, stronger than you've ever been. Because I know exactly what's going to happen after my death, and I've left you the tools to fight back. 6 months ago in May, when I could still walk without help, I went to Daniel's apartment. I wanted to bring him that lasagna. He loves your recipe, the one you taught me to make. I rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. I used the spare key he'd given me years ago for emergencies. I walked in thinking he might be in the shower or wearing headphones. But what I heard froze me in the hallway, Lottie. What I heard broke my heart. I stopped reading, put the letter down, picked up my cold tea and drank it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. Then I kept reading. Daniel was in the living room on a phone call, and these were his words. I'll never forget them. No, Trish, I can't tell Mom yet. It's too soon. First, I need to convince her that Aunt Grace should be in hospice care, that she can't handle taking care of her anymore. There was a pause. Then, yes, I talked to Victoria. She says once Aunt Grace passes and the doctors say it'll be soon, we can petition the court to have Mom declared mentally unfit to live alone. She's over 60, hasn't worked in years, spent all her time caring for a terminal patient. Any judge would agree she needs supervised care. Another pause. My hand on the voice recorder app on my phone capturing every word. The apartment's worth at least $500,000 now. This neighborhood's gentrifying fast. If we sell it and put Mom in a budget facility, Victoria found one in Queens that's only $1,500 a month, we'd clear over $400,000 after expenses. You'd get your share as a blood relative, and Victoria and I would use ours for the down payment on that house in Westchester we've been looking at. Lottie, I didn't run. I should have. But I stood there in his hallway for 48 minutes and recorded the entire conversation. Victoria joined him in the living room partway through. Trish was on speakerphone. All 3 of them planning every detail of how to rob you. I had to stop reading again. My hands were shaking so badly the pages rattled. Daniel, my son, my baby. He'd planned this. Not in a moment of weakness or confusion. He'd planned it with Victoria and Trish. Planned to have me declared mentally incompetent. Planned to steal my home. Planned to lock me in some cheap facility where I'd die alone and forgotten. All so he could buy a house in Westchester. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I kept reading. I went immediately to Arthur Goldstein. He's a lawyer, a good one. I showed him the recordings and told him everything. He helped me protect you, Lottie. The apartment is now in an irrevocable living trust. You are the lifetime beneficiary and the sole administrator. Nobody can sell it. Nobody can force you out. Nobody can make decisions about it without your explicit notarized consent, witnessed by 2 independent attorneys. Even if they somehow manage to have you declared mentally incompetent, which they won't, because Arthur has built protections into the trust, they still couldn't touch it. The trust includes what Arthur calls poison pill provisions. If anyone tries to challenge your rights to this property, the recordings automatically get released to the media and to the district attorney's office. Arthur will file criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. I spent $18,000, almost all my remaining savings, to make this fortress impossible to breach. It was worth every penny. But that's not all. The voice recorder in this envelope contains copies of all 17 conversations I recorded over the past 6 months. 17 times they discussed their plans, refined their strategy, talked about you like you were an obstacle to be removed. Listen to them when you're ready. They're painful, I know, but you need to understand who you're fighting. I also recorded a video. It's on the USB drive. In that video, I explain everything I discovered. I show the proof. I have 3 doctors certifying that I was of sound mind when I created the trust. I call Daniel, Victoria, and Trish out by name and describe their conspiracy in detail. Arthur will show this video when the time is right, when they make their move, and they will make their move. Lottie Arthur will be ready. One more thing. I've left very specific instructions with Arthur. If Daniel, Victoria, or Trish attempt any legal action against you, he has my permission to do 3 things. 1. Release all recordings publicly. 2. File criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult. 3. Show them my video. They'll have one chance to back down before Arthur destroys them. I know this is a lot to take in. I know you're hurt and angry and probably can't believe your own son would do this. But Lottie people show you who they really are when they think nobody's watching. Daniel showed me exactly who he's become. Don't let them take what's yours. Don't let them win. You are stronger than you think, more valuable than they made you believe, more loved than they can ever understand. This apartment is yours, little sister. Every book on these shelves, every photograph on these walls, every memory these rooms hold, it's all yours. Not because I'm gone, but because you earned it. You earned it by loving me through the hardest years of my life. You earned it by sacrificing your own future to give me dignity in death. Live here. Be happy. And please, please don't let anyone, not Daniel, not Victoria, not Trish, not anyone, take your dignity. I love you with my whole heart. You were the best part of my life, Charlotte Hayes. Your sister who will love you forever. Grace P.S. There's one more thing in the envelope. It's a photograph. Do you remember this day I looked? At the bottom of the envelope was a photograph slightly faded. Grace and me, age 16 and 8, sitting under the oak tree in our backyard. Grace's fingers were woven into my hair, braiding it with pink ribbons. We were both laughing, our faces lit with joy. On the back in Grace's handwriting, the day I promised to always protect you. A promise I'm keeping even now. I held that photograph to my chest and cried until I had no tears left. End of Part 1, 7,000 words. What happens next? Will Charlotte use Grace's evidence to fight back? What will Daniel's reaction be when he discovers his mother knows everything? And what exactly is on those recordings that could destroy his life? Don't miss Part 2, where the confrontation at the Riverside Room changes everything. If you're enjoying Charlotte's story, please like and subscribe. Comment below, what would you do if your own child betrayed you this way? What city are you watching from? I couldn't bring myself to listen to the recordings that first night. The letter was enough, more than enough. Instead, I sat on Grace's balcony, my balcony now, and watched the sun set over the pocket park across the street. A young mother pushed her toddler on the swings. An elderly man walked his dog. Life continued indifferent to my pain. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Mom, Victoria, and I are planning our anniversary dinner. We'd love for you to come. I'll send details soon. Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to fill my heart. Now they just made me feel hollow. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the number on Arthur Goldstein's business card. He answered on the second ring. Goldstein and Associates. Mr. Goldstein, my name is Charlotte Hayes. I'm Grace Hayes' sister. I just read her letter. A pause. Then his voice warm and somehow comforting. Charlotte, I've been waiting for your call. I'm so sorry for your loss. Grace was an extraordinary woman. She told me about the trust, about the recordings, about everything. She did, and she made me promise to protect you. That's exactly what I intend to do. Can we meet? I need to understand what happens next. Of course. Are you free tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock, my office is on Madison Avenue. Arthur Goldstein's office was nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined cold glass and steel intimidating artwork, the smell of expensive leather and power. Instead, I found warm wood paneling, overstuffed armchairs, and shelves lined with law books that actually looked red. Photographs covered one wall Arthur with what I assumed was his family. 3 children, multiple grandchildren, a woman with kind eyes who must have been his wife. Arthur himself was in his early 70s with completely white hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He stood when I entered, came around his desk, and took both my hands in his. "Mrs. Hayes," he said gently. "Charlotte, please sit. Can I get you coffee?" "Tea. Tea would be nice, thank you." He prepared it himself from a small electric kettle on a side table, asking how I took it, making sure the temperature was right. It was such a small kindness, but it made my eyes sting with unshed tears. "Grace spoke about you constantly," Arthur said as he handed me the cup. "She was so proud of you, the way you cared for her, the sacrifices you made. She wanted to make sure you were protected. She spent $18,000. It was worth every penny to her. And Charlotte, I need you to understand something." Arthur settled into the chair across from me, his expression serious. "What Grace created isn't just legally sound. It's a fortress. I've been practicing law for 47 years, and I've never built anything more airtight." He opened a file on his desk, thick, filled with documents. "The Hayes Family Irrevocable Living Trust was executed on May 15th of this year, 6 months before Grace's passing. 3 board-certified physicians examined Grace and signed affidavits certifying she was of completely sound mind. I have video documentation of the entire signing process. There is absolutely no legal basis for anyone to challenge her mental capacity. But Daniel said in the recording he said they could argue I'm mentally unfit. They can argue anything they want. Doesn't mean they'll win." Arthur's eyes hardened. "The trust has specific provisions. If you're ever subjected to a mental competency evaluation, which won't happen, but if it did, the trust mandates that 3 independent psychiatrists chosen by a neutral third party conduct the assessment, not doctors selected by whoever's challenging you. Independent experts." He pulled out another document. "Furthermore, any attempt to challenge your rights triggers an automatic response. The recordings get released to the media. Criminal charges get filed with the district attorney, and they get to watch Grace's video." The video. She mentioned it in her letter. Have you seen it?" Arthur's expression softened. "I have. Would you like to see it?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Arthur turned his computer monitor so we could both see it, then clicked play on a video file. The screen filled with Grace's face. It was clearly from her final weeks. She sat propped up in bed, bald from chemotherapy oxygen cannula in her nose. But her eyes were fierce, burning with an intensity that made my breath catch. "My name is Grace Elizabeth Hayes," she began, her voice weak but clear. "Today is December 7th, 2019. I'm recording this statement of my own free will with full mental capacity as certified by Dr. Susan Chen, Dr. Robert Martinez, and Dr. Kenji Tanaka." She held up a document to the camera, the doctor's signatures clearly visible. "I need to leave a record of a crime being planned against my sister Charlotte Marie Hayes by my nephew Daniel Michael Hayes, his wife Victoria Chen Hayes, and my cousin Patricia Morrison." For the next 20 minutes, Grace laid out everything. She played audio clips from the recordings. She showed bank statements proving she'd paid for the trust with her own money. She displayed the signed affidavits from her doctors. She explained in meticulous detail how Daniel, Victoria, and Trish had conspired to steal my home, and then she addressed each of them directly. "Daniel," Grace said, looking straight into the camera, "I raised you. When your father abandoned you, I was there. I taught you to read. I helped with your homework. I came to every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference when your mother had to work. I told you that real men protect the women they love. You promised me you'd never abandon your mother like your father did. You broke that promise in the cruelest way possible. You didn't just abandon her. You conspired to rob her, to have her declared mentally incompetent and locked away so you could buy a house in the suburbs. You sold your mother's freedom for a down payment. That makes you worse than your father ever was." The screen showed Grace's hands trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Patricia Morrison," she continued, "we've known each other our whole lives. You've envied me for decades, envied what you thought I had, but you never understood that the things you envied, respect, love, dignity, aren't things you can steal. You can't take them from Charlotte any more than you could take them from me. You're a hollow woman in expensive clothes, Patricia, and stealing from your cousin won't fill that emptiness inside you." Grace took a labored breath before continuing. "And Victoria Chen Hayes, you're the worst of all. You have no excuse of family history, no claim of misguided love. You saw a weak man with a generous mother, and you saw opportunity. You isolated Daniel from his family. You convinced him his mother was a burden instead of a blessing. You turned him against the woman who gave him life. You're a predator, Victoria. And I hope every word I'm saying haunts you for the rest of your life." The camera zoomed in slightly on Grace's face. "Charlotte, little sister, if you're watching this, it means they tried to hurt you and you had to fight back. I am so incredibly proud of you. Not because you're fighting, but because you're strong. Strong enough to survive Michael leaving. Strong enough to raise Daniel alone. Strong enough to care for me through 5 years of hell. You are stronger than you know, more valuable than they made you believe, and more loved than they can ever understand." Grace held up a key, the key to this apartment. "This is yours. Everything in this apartment is yours. The books I collected over a lifetime. The photographs of our childhood. The furniture I chose with such care. The view from this balcony that I loved so much. It's all yours, Lottie. Not because I'm dead, but because you earned it. You earned it through love and sacrifice and unwavering devotion." Her voice cracked slightly. "Live here. Be happy. Fill these rooms with laughter again. And please, please don't let anyone take your dignity. Dignity is the one thing they can never steal unless you give it away." Grace looked directly into the camera one last time. "I love you, Charlotte. You were the best part of my life. Every single day with you was a gift." The screen went black. I sat in Arthur's office, tears streaming down my face, unable to speak. Arthur handed me a box of tissues, then sat quietly while I cried. He didn't rush me, didn't offer platitudes. Just sat there, a kind presence, letting me grieve. Finally, when I could speak, I whispered, "She knew. She knew exactly what they were planning." "Grace was an extraordinary woman," Arthur said softly. "She loved you so much that she used her final months when she was in terrible pain to protect you. That's the kind of love most people never experience in their entire lives." "What happens now?" Arthur leaned forward. "Now we wait. They'll make their move soon. The anniversary party Daniel mentioned in his text, that's likely when they'll reveal their plan. They'll present it as a generous gesture, wanting to help you, take care of you. They'll try to manipulate you in public in front of witnesses so you feel pressured to agree. And when they do," Arthur's smile was sharp, "then we spring our trap." The formal invitation arrived 1 week later, just as Arthur had predicted. Cream cardstock, expensive printing, gold embossing. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Daniel and Victoria's 5th anniversary, the Riverside Room, Saturday, December 14th, 7:00 p.m., cocktail attire. Please RSVP by December 7th. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to refuse to attend, to cut them out of my life completely. But the bigger part, the part that remembered Grace's fierce eyes in that video, wanted to fight. I called Arthur. "They sent the invitation. Expected. Are you going to attend?" "Yes." "Good. I'll come with you." "Arthur, you don't have to." "Charlotte, I made a promise to Grace. I intend to keep it. Besides," his voice took on a hint of satisfaction, "I haven't had a case this righteous in years. I'm rather looking forward to it." "What should I bring?" "Nothing. I'll handle everything. You just need to be brave. Can you do that?" I thought about Grace. About her teaching me to read under that oak tree. About her moving in with me when Michael left. About her spending her final months protecting me even while dying. "Yes," I said, "I can be brave." The 2 weeks before the anniversary dinner were the longest of my life. Daniel called twice. Both times I let it go to voicemail. "Hey, Mom, just checking if you got the invitation. Victoria's so excited for you to come. It's going to be a really special night. Call me back." Special. Yes, I'm sure it would be special. The second message was similar, but with a slightly worried edge. "Mom, you haven't RSVP'd yet. Is everything okay? Please call me. We really want you there." I almost called him back. Almost picked up the phone and said, "Daniel, I know everything. I know what you're planning. How could you do this to me?" but Arthur had advised against it. Let them think they have the upper hand, he'd said. Let them walk into their own trap. I focused on other things. I went through Grace's belongings, boxing up clothes to donate, but keeping the items that mattered. Her favorite sweater, soft from years of washing. Her collection of poetry books with notes in the margins. Her reading glasses, which I couldn't quite bring myself to throw away. I found a photo album I'd never seen before. Grace must have made it in those final months. Pictures of us throughout our lives. The two of us as children. Me holding baby Daniel. Grace with Daniel at his elementary school graduation. The three of us at Daniel's college graduation, his arms around both of us, all of us smiling. That young man in the photograph looked so different from the person who'd conspired to rob me. When had he changed? When had Victoria's influence become stronger than everything Grace and I had taught him? Or had he always been capable of this, and we'd just refused to see it? 3 days before the anniversary dinner, I finally listened to the recordings. All 17 of them. I made tea, sat on the couch with Grace's reading blanket around my shoulders, and pressed play on the first file. Daniel's voice filled the apartment. No, Trish, I can't tell Mom yet. It's too soon. I listened to all of them over the course of 6 hours. By the end, I was numb. They'd discussed everything. Which psychiatrist to bribe for a diagnosis of dementia? Which nursing home to put me in nothing fancy? We need to minimize monthly costs to maximize our profit. How to sell the apartment quickly. Patricia knows a developer who'll pay cash, no questions. How to divide the money. 1/3 to Patricia as a blood relative, 2/3 to us. In one recording from April, Victoria's voice was particularly cold. Daniel, your mother made her choices. She married a loser who abandoned her. She never went to college, never built a career. She spent her whole life making bad decisions. Why should we suffer because of her failures? We deserve that house in Westchester. We deserve to start our family in a nice place, not sacrifice our future for an old woman who never did anything productive with her life. An old woman who never did anything productive. I'd raised Daniel alone, worked 2 jobs, put food on the table, clothes on his back, paid for his school supplies and soccer uniforms and college application fees. I'd sacrificed dates and friendships and any chance of a life of my own to make sure he had everything he needed. And to Victoria, I was just an old woman who'd never done anything productive. The final recording was from late October, just 2 months ago. Once we have her in the facility, we cut contact to minimal, Trish's voice said. Monthly phone calls maybe. No visits unless absolutely necessary. She'll be too sedated to cause problems anyway. Victoria laughed. By the time she realizes what happened, it'll be too late to do anything about it. Daniel's voice quieter than the others. I keep thinking about Aunt Grace, about what she'd say if she knew Grace is dead, Victoria snapped. She doesn't get an opinion anymore. This is about our future, Daniel. Ours, not your mother's. She had her chance at life. A pause. Then Daniel, you're right. I'm sorry. I just needed to hear you say it again. I love you, Victoria said, her voice softening. And I'm doing this for us, for the family we're going to build. Your mother will be fine in the facility. She might even be happier with people her own age. I turned off the recording, sat in the silence of the apartment. Grace's apartment. My apartment. The apartment they wanted to take from me. Not anymore. Saturday, December 14th arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in the beige suit Grace had given me 2 years ago. It still fit, though it hung a bit looser now I'd lost weight these past months. I added my mother's pearl necklace and comfortable heels. I wanted to look dignified, strong. Arthur picked me up at 6:30 in a modest sedan. He wore a dark suit and carried his battered leather briefcase, the one he'd told me that he'd used for 40 years. Ready? He asked as I slid into the passenger seat. No, but let's do it anyway. He smiled. That's the spirit. The Riverside room was exactly the kind of place Victoria would choose. All glass and chrome and stunning views of the Hudson River. As we walked in, I saw the hostess's eyes flick over my suit, assessing, judging, finding it wanting compared to the designer dresses filling the room. Reservation for Hayes, Arthur said smoothly. The hostess checked her tablet. Oh yes, the anniversary party. Right this way. She led us through the restaurant to a private room overlooking the water. Inside, about 15 people milled about with champagne glasses. I recognized some of them, Daniel's friends from college, Victoria's colleagues. And there at the center stood Daniel and Victoria. Victoria wore an emerald green dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Cartier jewelry glittered at her throat and wrists. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like success, like power, like everything I wasn't. Daniel wore a gray Hugo Boss suit. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room, checking details, making sure everything was perfect. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Mom, you came." He hurried over, pulled me into a hug. He smelled like expensive cologne and hair product. When had my son started wearing cologne? "Of course I came," I said, my voice steady. "I wouldn't miss your anniversary." Victoria appeared at his elbow, her smile bright and false. "Charlotte, you look lovely. That suit is so classic." Classic, the kind word for outdated. "Thank you, Victoria. You look beautiful." "And who's this?" Victoria's eyes had locked onto Arthur, calculating. "Arthur Goldstein," Arthur said, extending his hand. "I'm a friend of the family. I knew Grace for many years. Charlotte was kind enough to invite me." I saw the flicker of concern in Victoria's eyes. A lawyer, that wasn't part of their plan. "How wonderful," she said, her voice tight. "Any friend of Grace's is welcome." We were guided to a large round table set for 12. Name cards in elegant calligraphy marked each seat. I was placed between Arthur and a woman I didn't know, one of Victoria's work friends, I assumed. Directly across from me, Trish. My cousin wore a burgundy dress and a smile that made my skin crawl. "Charlotte, it's been too long. How are you holding up?" "It must be so hard living in that apartment all alone. So many memories." "I'm managing," I said evenly. "Well, if you ever need anything, advice about the apartment, help with decisions, you know I'm always here for family." "How kind of you." The meal began. First course oysters Rockefeller, then a salad with pear and candied walnuts, entrees of filet mignon or Chilean sea bass, wine flowing freely. Victoria held court, talking about her thriving business lies according to the background check Arthur had run. Her company was being investigated for fraudulent billing. She'd lost 3 major clients in the past 2 months. Trish chimed in with stories about her latest European vacation paid for with credit cards she couldn't afford, drowning in debt while pretending to be wealthy. Daniel sat beside Victoria, smiling, laughing at the right moments, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He kept glancing at me, then looking away quickly. He knew. On some level, he knew what was coming. After dessert, an elaborate chocolate creation with gold leaf, the waiters brought out champagne. Veuve Clicquot. I recognized the orange label. $180 a bottle. Daniel stood tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell quiet. "Thank you all for coming tonight." He began, his voice carrying that rehearsed quality of a prepared speech. "Victoria and I are so blessed to have such amazing friends and family supporting us." He looked down at Victoria with what appeared to be genuine adoration. "Honey, these past 5 years have been transformative. You've made me the man I am today. You've taught me what really matters in life." I almost laughed. Yes, Victoria had certainly taught him what mattered: money and status. "And I want you to know that I'll always take care of you, that you'll always have a home with me." Applause rippled through the room. Victoria beamed up at Daniel, her hand on her heart in a gesture of touched surprise. But I could see the anticipation in her eyes. This was it, the moment they'd been planning. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My mouth went dry. He opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, building drama. From inside, he withdrew a key ring with 3 shiny brass keys attached to a small blue ribbon. "Honey," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, "I had these made especially for you. 3 copies, so you'll never be locked out." He held the keys up for everyone to see. The light caught the metal, making them glint. "These are the keys to our future. Keys to the apartment on Lincoln Avenue." Gasps from the guests who didn't know what was happening. Knowing looks from those who did. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth in that gesture of surprised delight she'd probably practiced in the mirror. "Daniel, oh my God. So you'll always have a place to land." Daniel continued, placing the keys in her palm and closing her fingers around them. "So that place can be ours." More applause, louder this time. Trish was clapping harder than anyone, a huge smile on her face. What a generous son, what a thoughtful husband. One of Victoria's friends leaned over and said loudly enough for half the table to hear, "Is that the apartment his mother inherited, the one worth $500,000?" My hands gripped the edge of the table. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. I stood. The movement was sudden enough that conversation stuttered to a halt. All eyes turned to me. "What an interesting gift," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Giving away something that doesn't belong to you, that requires a special kind of audacity." Daniel's smile froze. "Mom, we can talk about this later." "No, Daniel. If we're going to make public theater out of my life, then everyone should know the whole story." Victoria's fingers tightened on the keys. Trish set down her wine glass with a sharp click. Arthur stood beside me, opening his briefcase with deliberate movements. "Mom, please." Daniel's voice held a warning note. "Please what?" I met my son's eyes across the table. "Please let you steal my home. Please let you lock me in a nursing home so you can buy a house in Westchester. Please cooperate with your plan to have me declared mentally incompetent." The room erupted in whispers, confused looks. One woman reached for her phone. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victoria said, her voice sharp, but her face had gone pale. "Don't you—" Arthur's voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. "Perhaps we should clarify the situation for everyone here." He set his laptop on the table, connecting it to a small portable speaker. Daniel's face had drained of all color. "Mr. Goldstein, there's no need." "Oh, I think there's every need." Arthur's smile was cold. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, Daniel here didn't make copies of his mother's keys. He made illegal copies of an apartment that doesn't belong to him, was never promised to him, and that he has absolutely no legal right to access." "That's not true," Trish interjected, her voice rising. "Grace would have wanted Daniel to have that apartment." "Would she?" Arthur turned his laptop screen toward the room and pressed play. Grace's face filled the screen. Bald, gaunt oxygen tubes visible, but her eyes blazing with righteous fury. The room fell absolutely silent. "My name is Grace Elizabeth Hayes," Grace's recorded voice began. "Today is December 7th, 2019. I watched the faces around the table as Grace's video played. Confusion turning to shock. Shock morphing into disgust. When Grace played the first audio clip, Daniel's voice saying, "We can petition the court to have Mom declared mentally unfit to live alone," several people gasped. Victoria tried to stand. "This is a private family matter." "Sit down," Arthur said quietly. But something in his tone made Victoria sink back into her chair. The video continued. Grace methodically laying out the evidence, playing clips from the recordings. Daniel discussing which psychiatrist to bribe. Trish talking about maximizing profit. Victoria calling me an old woman who never did anything productive with her life. That last one hit the room like a physical blow. I saw Daniel flinch, saw Trish close her eyes, saw Victoria's mask of composure finally crack. When Grace addressed each of them directly, calling them out by name, describing their conspiracy, telling Daniel he was worse than his father ever was, I heard actual sobs from somewhere in the room. The video ended with Grace's final words, "I love you, Charlotte. You were the best part of my life." The screen went black. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Arthur's voice, crisp and professional. That video was recorded 6 weeks before Grace Hayes' death with her full mental capacity, certified by 3 board-certified physicians. Everything you just heard is admissible in court. He turned to face Daniel, Victoria, and Trish. The apartment at 847 Lincoln Avenue is held in an irrevocable living trust. Charlotte Hayes is the lifetime beneficiary and sole administrator. Nobody can sell it, claim it, or make decisions about it without her explicit notarized consent. Arthur placed his hand on a stack of documents in his briefcase. "I have here 17 recorded conversations documenting your conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and planning to forge medical documents. Each of these is a criminal offense." "You can't," Trish started. "Can't what? Can't file charges?" Arthur's smile was sharp. "Oh, I absolutely can. And I will. Unless—" He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Unless what?" Daniel whispered. He looked like he might be sick. Arthur looked at me. This was my moment. The moment to choose revenge or mercy. I thought about Grace, about her final words, about dignity and love and everything she'd taught me. Unless, I said slowly, you accept my terms right now, all three of you. I pulled out a piece of paper Arthur and I had prepared. Term 1. Daniel, you will publicly acknowledge right now to everyone in this room what you plan to do. Daniel's throat worked. Tears streaked his face. I planned to have my mother declared mentally incompetent so Victoria and I could sell her apartment and use the money to buy a house. I conspired with my wife and my cousin to steal my mother's home. His voice broke on the last word. Several people in the room were crying. Term 2, Victoria, you will apologize. A genuine apology. Victoria's jaw clenched. Her eyes burned with hatred. But she looked at the documents in Arthur's briefcase, at the evidence that could destroy her completely, and spoke. I apologize for my role in this plan. I let greed override decency. I'm sorry. The words sounded like they'd been dragged from her throat with rusty hooks. Term 3, Patricia, you will sign a legal document waiving any and all claims to Grace's estate now and forever. Tricia's face was blotchy with tears, though whether from shame or anger I couldn't tell. I'll sign. Term 4, Daniel, you will attend mandatory therapy. I'll require proof of attendance monthly for the next year. I will. Term 5, Victoria and Patricia, you will have no contact with me for a minimum of 2 years. No calls, no texts, no emails, no visits. Nothing. Agreed, Victoria said through clenched teeth. Fine, Trish whispered. Arthur produced documents from his briefcase. These papers formalize everything Charlotte just stated. Sign them now in front of all these witnesses or I file criminal charges Monday morning at 9 a.m. His portable notary stamp sat ready on the table. One by one they signed. Daniel's hand shook so badly he could barely write his name. Victoria's signature was angry slashes of ink. Trish cried silently as she signed. Arthur notarized each document with efficient movements. One more thing, I said, looking at the keys still clutched in Victoria's hand. Those keys are illegal copies. Give them to me. Victoria dropped them on the table like they burned her. I picked them up and put them in my purse. Then I looked at my son, really looked at him for what felt like the first time in years. Daniel, I don't know who you've become. I don't know if it's possible for you to find your way back to the person you used to be, but I hope for your sake more than mine that you try. I turned to leave Arthur beside me. Behind us, the party sat in ruins. As we reached the door, Daniel called out, Mom, wait! I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said, his voice wrecked with tears. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. Neither do I said quietly. But that's something you need to figure out. And then Arthur and I walked out of the Riverside room, leaving behind the wreckage of the family I'd thought I had. The restaurant manager was waiting in the hallway. He looked distressed. Mrs. Hayes, he said, approaching cautiously. I couldn't help but overhear some of what happened in there. I want you to know your meal tonight is completely complimentary. What your sister did for you, that's true love. I'm honored you chose our restaurant for this. His kindness made my eyes sting with tears. Thank you. As Arthur and I walked through the main dining room, I noticed several people watching us. One woman, a grandmother type with kind eyes, reached out and squeezed my hand as I passed. You're very brave, she whispered. Outside, the December air was sharp and cold. I gulped it in, feeling like I could breathe properly for the first time in hours. Arthur's sedan was warm when we got in. He didn't start the engine immediately, just sat there giving me time to process. How do you feel? He finally asked. I don't know. Relieved, angry, sad. I looked at him. Is that normal? After what you just went through, absolutely normal. He started the car. Charlotte, what you did in there that took tremendous courage. Grace would be so proud. I keep thinking, when did Daniel change? When did he become someone who could do this? Maybe he didn't change. Maybe Victoria just revealed what was already there. Arthur pulled out of the parking lot. Or maybe, and this is what I hope, maybe this is his rock bottom. The moment that forces him to look at who he's become and decide to be better. Do you think that's possible? That he could change? I think people can change if they want to badly enough. The question is whether Daniel wants to. Arthur glanced at me. But that's his journey now, not yours. You've done everything you can. The rest is up to him. We drove in silence for a while. The city lights blurred past the windows. "What happens now?" I asked as we neared my building. Now you live your life, Charlotte. You heal. You figure out what makes you happy. You honor Grace's memory by being everything she believed you could be." He pulled up in front of my building, the building that was legally, irrevocably, permanently mine. "Thank you, Arthur, for everything. Thank Grace. She's the one who set this all in motion." He squeezed my hand gently. "But if you need anything at all, you call me. I promised Grace I'd look after you, and I keep my promises." I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, my legs shaky with adrenaline crash. Inside the apartment, I dropped my purse on the entry table and stood in the middle of the living room. Grace's books on the shelves, Grace's furniture, Grace's photographs on the walls, my books, my furniture, my photographs now. I walked to Grace's picture, the one on the mantel where she was smiling that radiant smile full of life and joy. "I did it," I whispered. "I fought back, just like I promised." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The video from tonight is already viral. 2.4 million views and counting. People are calling you a hero. Jessica, Victoria's friend from the party." I stared at that text. Someone had recorded the confrontation. Of course they had. In this age, everything gets recorded. Part of me was horrified. My family's dysfunction exposed to millions of strangers. But another part, the part that sounded like Grace, thought good. Let the world see what greed does to people. Let it be a warning. I didn't respond to Jessica's text. Instead, I changed into comfortable clothes, made myself chamomile tea, and curled up on the couch with Grace's reading blanket. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out what came next. How to rebuild a life. How to navigate the reality of my son's betrayal. But tonight, I just sat in the apartment Grace had protected for me, feeling the weight of her love surrounding me like armor. I'd won the battle. Now I had to figure out how to win the war of healing. The next morning, I woke to 73 missed calls. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters probably having seen the viral video. 3 were from Trish's number. I deleted those voicemails without listening, and 5 were from Daniel. I stared at his name on my screen. My finger hovered over the voicemail icon. Part of me needed to know what he had to say. The other part, the wounded, angry part, wanted to delete them all and pretend he'd never existed. Grace's voice echoed in my memory. "You're stronger than you think, Lottie." I pressed play on the first message. "Mom," Daniel's voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying for hours. "Mom, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything right now. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know I'm leaving. Victoria and we're done. She left an hour ago, packed her things and left. Said I was a coward. Said if I'd handled things better, she wouldn't be losing everything." A bitter laugh. "She's right. I am a coward. I let her convince me that you were a burden instead of my mother, the woman who gave up everything to raise me alone. How did I become this person, Mom? How did I turn into Dad?" The message cut off. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched in my hand, heart pounding. The second message. "It's 3 a.m. I can't sleep. I keep seeing Aunt Grace's face in that video. The way she looked at the camera when she said I was worse than Dad. She was right. Dad left, but at least he didn't try to steal from you first. At least he didn't conspire to lock you away like garbage." His voice cracked. "I've called Dr. Patricia Wu. She's a therapist. My first appointment is Tuesday. I know you said I have to do this, but I would have done it anyway. I need help, Mom. I need to figure out how I got so lost." The third message was shorter. "I love you. I know I don't have the right to say that after what I did, but it's true. I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of being your son again." The fourth message, Victoria's lawyer called. "She wants me to give you a message. She's moving to Philadelphia, taking a job there. She said to tell you that you won, and I hope you're happy. But Mom, there are no winners here. We all lost. I lost my wife, my self-respect, my relationship with you. Victoria lost her career and her reputation. And you had to fight your own son just to keep what was rightfully yours. What kind of family does that to each other?" The fifth message was different, quieter, more thoughtful. "I was cleaning out the closet today, found a box of old photos. There's one of you, me and Aunt Grace, at my 8th grade graduation. You're both smiling so big, so proud. I remember that day. Aunt Grace bought me a new tie because I'd outgrown my old one. You took the day off work even though you couldn't afford to. I felt so loved, Mom. So incredibly loved. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. I don't know when I stopped feeling that. Or maybe I never stopped feeling it. I let other things become more important. The house. The status. What Victoria wanted. I let her voice become louder than yours in my head. Another pause. I'm going to fix this. I don't know how, but I'm going to become the man Aunt Grace wanted me to be. The man you raised me to be. Even if you never speak to me again, even if I've destroyed us completely, I'm going to try. The message ended. I sat there for a long time, phone in my lap, tears running down my face. Was it possible? Could people really change? I didn't call Daniel back. Not that day, not that week. Instead, I focused on the apartment, on Grace's things, on figuring out what I wanted my life to look like now that I'd won my home but lost my family. The video from the Riverside room had indeed gone viral. By Monday morning, it had 12 million views. The comments section was a battlefield. This is heartbreaking. My own daughter tried to do something similar to me. God bless this woman for fighting back. That son should be in jail. What a monster. The sister recording that video while dying of cancer. I'm sobbing. That's real love. Anyone else notice the daughter-in-law's face when the truth came out? That is the face of someone who got caught. My mother is 68 and lives alone. After seeing this, I'm calling her right now to tell her I love her. But there were other comments, too. This feels staged, too perfect. Family matters should stay private. Airing this publicly is just as bad as what the son did. The old lady is probably exaggerating. Sons don't just turn evil for no reason. I read them all. The supportive ones made me cry. The critical ones made me angry. But underneath it all was a strange sense of purpose. Grace's story was helping people. Women who'd felt invisible were seeing themselves in me. Adult children were calling their aging parents. Families were having difficult but necessary conversations about caregiving and inheritance. Grace's death, her planning her sacrifice, was creating ripples far beyond just protecting me. On Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the anniversary dinner, Arthur called. Charlotte, I have news. Trish's lawyer contacted me this morning. My stomach clenched. What does she want now? Nothing. She's dropping everything. Officially and permanently. Her lawyer sent over documents relinquishing any and all claims to Grace's estate. But there's more. Arthur's voice took on a note of grim satisfaction. Trish is filing for bankruptcy. Her husband is divorcing her. The debt she'd accumulated trying to maintain that wealthy facade finally caught up with her. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt sad. What about Victoria? Her company closed last week. The fraud investigation found enough evidence to press charges, but Victoria took a plea deal. She's moving to Philadelphia, as Daniel told you, to work as a junior account executive. Massive demotion. The viral video destroyed what was left of her professional reputation. And Daniel? A pause. I don't know, Charlotte. He's not my client. Would you like me to find out, Ben? Did I want to know if my son was keeping his promises, or would that just reopen wounds that needed time to heal? Not yet, I said finally. Maybe eventually, but not yet. That's fair. Oh, one more thing. Several news outlets want to interview you. Good Morning America, The Today Show, even 60 Minutes. They want to do a story about elder abuse and financial exploitation. You'd be helping a lot of people. I'll think about it. But I already knew my answer. Grace hadn't made that video to get me on television. She'd made it to protect me. The viral video had been an accident, a consequence, not a goal. I wanted privacy. I wanted peace. I wanted to figure out how to live in this apartment without feeling Grace's absence in every room. 2 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I couldn't keep living in a museum of grief. Grace hadn't saved this apartment so I could sit here alone surrounded by ghosts and memories. She'd saved it so I could live. But how? What did living look like for a 65-year-old woman with no job, A destroyed family in an apartment full of books. I made coffee and sat on the balcony despite the December cold, wrapped in Grace's reading blanket. Below in the pocket park, I watched an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench. She had a book in her lap, but she wasn't reading. Just staring into space with that particular kind of loneliness I recognized all too well. And suddenly I knew. I knew what Grace would want me to do with this space. I called Arthur that afternoon. I want to turn the apartment into a gathering place for women like me, older women who are alone. A non-profit? Arthur asked, his tone interested. No, nothing that formal, just a place to meet, to talk, to know you're not invisible. I was talking faster now, the idea crystallizing as I spoke. Twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, coffee conversation community. That's all. Charlotte, that's a beautiful idea. Grace would love it. I'll need to rearrange some furniture, set up the living room for group seating, maybe convert Grace's bedroom into a quiet reading room, use her books she'd want them to be read, not just sit on shelves. What do you need from me? Legal advice. I don't want any formal organization, no fees, no membership, no bylaws, just neighbors helping neighbors. Is that possible? Absolutely. You're simply inviting people into your private home. No permits needed, no regulations. As long as you're not charging money or calling it a business, you're fine. Good. I'll start this week. I spent the next 3 days transforming the apartment. Grace's furniture stayed, but I rearranged it. The couch and armchairs formed a conversation circle in the living room. I bought extra folding chairs at a thrift store, sturdy, comfortable, nothing fancy. I set up a coffee station on the kitchen counter with a large coffee maker I found on sale, a selection of teas, and some nice mugs. Grace's bedroom became a reading room. I moved her bed out and brought in 2 comfortable reading chairs from a consignment shop. Her books lined the walls. I added soft lighting and a small table for setting down cups. On that table, I placed Grace's photograph, her favorite, where she was smiling in her classroom surrounded by 8-year-olds. Underneath, I put a small plaque Arthur had helped me order, Grace Elizabeth Hayes, teacher, sister, protector. This space exists because of her love. I made flyers on my computer. Simple, nothing fancy. Grace's Circle, a gathering space for women. 60 plus, no fees. No judgment. Just community coffee conversation connection. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 5 p.m., 847 Lincoln Avenue. Apt 3, I posted them at the community center, the library, the local senior center, even the grocery store bulletin board. Then I waited. The first Tuesday I made coffee at 1:30, set out cookies I'd baked that morning using Grace's recipe, and sat on the couch nervously. 2 o'clock came and went. No one. 2:15. Still no one. At 2:20 I started to feel foolish. What had I been thinking? That women would just show up at a stranger's apartment for coffee. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a small, nervous-looking woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "I saw your flyer at the library," she said hesitantly. "I'm Helen Rodriguez. I hope I'm not too late." "You're perfect," I said, relief flooding through me. "Please come in. I'm Charlotte." Helen stepped inside, looking around the apartment with appreciation. "What a lovely space. All these books. They were my sister's. She was a teacher. She passed away a year ago. This was her apartment. Now it's mine." Helen's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss. My husband died 3 years ago. I thought I was prepared to be alone. I wasn't." We sat in the living room. I poured coffee. We talked. Helen had been a nurse for 40 years. She had 2 daughters who lived in California. They video called once a week, but never visited. "They say it's too expensive to fly out," Helen said, her voice carefully neutral. "They have their own families now, their own lives. That must be lonely." "It is." Helen met my eyes. "But you know what the worst part is, feeling invisible. I can go days without anyone speaking to me. The grocery store checkout person, the mailman, that's it. Some days I talk to my cat just to hear a voice, even if it's my own." My heart ached. That's exactly why I started this. So women like us know we're not invisible. We're not forgotten. At 2:40, the doorbell rang again. This time it was an elegant African-American woman in her late 60s wearing a beautiful purple coat. "I'm Dorothy Kim," she said with a slight Korean accent. "I saw your flyer at the senior center. I hope it's not too late to join." "Not at all. Please come in." By 3 o'clock, we had 5 women. Helen Dorothy, a quiet woman named Nina Okoye, who'd emigrated from Nigeria 30 years ago. Susan Walsh, a recently divorced former teacher who'd known Grace professionally, and Maria Santos, who spoke limited English, but whose warm smile transcended language barriers. We sat in a circle, introduced ourselves, shared our stories. Dorothy's husband had early onset Alzheimer's and was in a memory care facility. "My children say visiting him is too depressing," she said, tears in her eyes. "They expect me to just move on, as if 52 years of marriage means nothing." Nina's children had moved to California for better jobs. "My son says, 'Mama, you can Zoom us anytime.' But a screen isn't the same as a hug." Susan had been married for 35 years before her husband left her for a younger woman. "At 63, I'm apparently too old to be desirable, but too young for sympathy. I'm just in between, invisible." Maria communicated through gestures and broken English, but we understood she was alone, widowed, her family back in Mexico. She was lonely. I shared my story too. Not all of it, not about Daniel and Victoria and the betrayal, just the core truth. My sister left me this apartment. My family tried to take it from me. I fought back. I won. But now I'm alone, and I realized having a home means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Helen reached across the circle and took my hand. "You're not alone anymore." And just like that, Grace's circle was born. Over the next 8 weeks, Grace's circle grew. Week 2, 8 women. Week 4, 12 women. Week 6, 18 women. Week 8, 23 women, and the apartment was packed to capacity. We established a rhythm. Tuesdays were for conversation and connection. Thursdays were for learning and doing. I taught sewing using Grace's old Singer machine that I'd found in her closet. We mended clothes, altered thrift store finds, created beautiful things from scraps. Dorothy, who'd been an accountant, taught basic financial literacy. "Don't let your children manage your money without oversight," she'd say firmly. "Stay involved. Stay informed. Stay in control." Helen shared medical knowledge, how to advocate for yourself with doctors, what questions to ask, how to manage medications on a fixed income. Susan started a reading group using Grace's extensive library. We read everything from poetry to mystery novels to memoirs. Nina taught us Igbo phrases. Maria taught Spanish. We taught Maria English. Language barriers dissolved into laughter and patience, and the universal language of women supporting women. But the most important thing we did was simply be together. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes. We held each other when grief hit hard. We problem-solved together when someone faced a difficult situation. We became family, not the family we were born into, but the family we chose. One Thursday in February, a new woman appeared at the door. She was younger than our usual members, maybe 60, well-dressed, but with haunted eyes I recognized immediately. "I'm Norma Fisher," she said quietly. "Helen Rodriguez is my neighbor. She told me about this group. She said there were women here who understood what it's like to feel invisible. Come in, Norma. You're welcome here." The group fell silent as Norma told her story. It was terrifyingly familiar. Her son and daughter-in-law were trying to take her house. They'd convinced her to put the deed in her son's name for tax purposes. Now they were trying to force her into assisted living so they could sell the property. "They say I'm not safe living alone," Norma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They've told my doctor I'm forgetful. They're building a case that I'm incompetent. But I'm not. I'm lonely and sad and scared, but I'm not incompetent." Helen moved to sit beside Norma, taking her hand. Dorothy pulled out tissues. Nina brought her tea. And I knew exactly what to do. "Norma, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, kneeling in front of her chair. "You are not alone. You are not powerless. And you are not going to lose your home." I told her about Arthur Goldstein, gave her his card, explained about trusts and legal protections and how to fight back. "But I can't afford an expensive lawyer. Arthur works with people on sliding scales. He'll help you. And in the meantime, we're here. All of us. You have witnesses now. You have a community. You're not fighting alone anymore." The room erupted in affirmations. Every woman there had either experienced something similar or feared they might. We rallied around Norma like an army. Within a week, Arthur had helped Norma set up protective legal structures. Within 2 weeks, her son's lawyer had backed off, realizing Norma wasn't the easy target they'd thought. Within a month, Norma was smiling again, sleeping through the night, attending Grace's circle twice a week, and volunteering to help other women who faced similar situations. That's when I understood Grace hadn't just saved me. She'd created a blueprint for saving others. It was a Tuesday in late March, 4 months after the anniversary dinner, when Daniel appeared at my door. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight. His hair was longer, less styled. He wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual designer clothes. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They looked awake, present, aware. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know I have no right to be here. I know you said no contact, but I needed to tell you something in person." I should have closed the door, should have reminded him of the terms of the boundaries of everything that had been destroyed. But he was my son, and some part of me, the part that remembered his gap-toothed grin and his small hand in mine, needed to hear what he had to say. 5 minutes, I said, not inviting him inside. I stepped into the hallway and closed the apartment door behind me. Grace's circle was meeting in there, and I wouldn't let him disturb that space. We stood in the fluorescent-lit hallway, this man who used to be my baby boy, and me the mother he'd tried to betray. "I've been in therapy 3 times a week since December," Daniel began. "Dr. Wu is helping me understand how I let Victoria manipulate me, how I confused material success with actual worth, how I became exactly what Aunt Grace warned me not to be." He pulled out his phone, showed me an app. "This is my therapy attendance log. I haven't missed a single session. I'm also in a support group for adult children who've damaged relationships with their parents." "Daniel, please let me finish." His voice was raw with emotion. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm here because Dr. Wu says part of recovery is taking accountability without expecting anything in return. So I'm here to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for plotting against you. I'm sorry for putting money over family. I'm sorry for forgetting every lesson you and Aunt Grace ever taught me. I'm sorry for becoming my father." Tears ran down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. "I know you've started something beautiful here. Helen Rodriguez's grandson is my friend from college, Marcus. He told me about Grace's circle, about how you've created this community for women who feel invisible. Mom, that's incredible. That's exactly what Aunt Grace would have wanted. How did you know about—" "Marcus visits his grandmother every week now. Because of your group, he realized he'd been neglecting her. He told me what you're doing, and I just—" Daniel's voice broke. "I'm so proud of you, Mom, and so ashamed of myself." We stood in silence. Down the hall, someone's television played too loudly. The elevator dinged. "I'm not ready," I said finally. "I'm not ready to forgive you or to have you back in my life. I don't know if I'll ever be ready." "I understand. But I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm glad you're trying to change. That matters, Daniel. It doesn't fix what happened, but it matters." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "Can I ask one thing? Not now, but someday when you're ready, if you're ever ready, could we maybe have coffee? Just to talk. I don't want to be your son again, not yet. I haven't earned that. But maybe we could be 2 people who used to know each other trying to figure out if there's anything worth rebuilding." I thought about Grace, about her fierce protection and her capacity for love, about how she'd believed people could change if they truly wanted to. "Maybe," I said. "Someday. Not now, but maybe." "That's more than I deserve. Thank you, Mom." He turned to leave, then paused. From his backpack, he pulled out a photo album. "I found this in my storage unit. Photos of you, me, and Aunt Grace when I was little. I thought you might want them. Memories of when I was the person she believed I could be." He set the album on the floor between us and walked away. I watched him go, this stranger with my son's face, then picked up the album and went back inside. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat on the couch with the photo album Daniel had brought. Inside were pictures I'd forgotten existed. Daniel at age 5 hugging Grace's legs at the park. Daniel at 7 showing Grace a painting he'd made at school. Daniel at 10, Grace helping him with a science project. And there near the back, a photo from Daniel's 8th grade graduation, the one he'd mentioned in his voicemail. Grace and I standing on either side of Daniel, all 3 of us beaming. Daniel wore the tie Grace had bought him. I wore my best dress. We looked happy, complete. When had that boy become the man who'd tried to steal my home? Or more accurately, had that boy ever really existed? Or had he always been capable of betrayal? And Grace and I just chose to see the best in him. Dr. Wu would probably say the truth was somewhere in between. That people aren't purely good or evil, just complex and flawed and capable of both tremendous love and terrible harm. I closed the album and looked around the apartment, at the circle of chairs where Grace's circle met, at the reading room that had been Grace's bedroom, at the walls covered with photographs of women who'd become my family. Grace had saved this apartment for me, but in doing so, she'd given me something far more valuable a purpose. I wasn't just Charlotte Hayes' betrayed mother-grieving sister. I was Charlotte Hayes, creator of communities, protector of women who felt invisible. Grace's legacy wasn't just this apartment. It was the ripples of love and protection spreading outward, changing lives, preventing other families from destroying each other the way mine nearly had. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Mrs. Hayes. This is Marcus Rodriguez, Helen's grandson. She talks about you constantly. I just wanted to say thank you for giving her a place to belong. She was so isolated after Grandpa died. Now she's happy again. You're doing something really special." I replied, "Thank you, Marcus. Your grandmother is a treasure. We're lucky to have her." Another text, this one from Arthur. "Just heard from Norma Fisher's lawyer. Her son has dropped all attempts to get guardianship. She's safe. That's 5 women you've helped protect now, Charlotte. Grace would be so proud." 5 women. 5 women who would have lost their homes, their freedom, their dignity, if not for Grace's circle, if not for women supporting women, if not for the community Grace's sacrifice had made possible. I walked to the mantel to Grace's photograph with the plaque beneath it. "We did it, Grace," I whispered. "We're fighting back. Not just for me, but for all of us." The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the city outside. But it didn't feel empty. It felt full of the love that had been shared here, the tears that had been shed, the laughter that had echoed off these walls. I was 65 years old. My son had betrayed me. My cousin had tried to rob me. My family had shattered. But I wasn't alone. I had Helen and Dorothy and Nina and Susan and Maria and Norma and 18 other women who chose me as their family, who showed up twice a week, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because we'd created something real and necessary and beautiful. That night I dreamed of Grace. We were children again, sitting under the oak tree in our backyard. She was braiding my hair with pink ribbons, and we were both laughing. "You did good, Lottie," Dream Grace set her fingers gentle in my hair. "You took what I gave you and made it into something even better. That's exactly what love is supposed to do, multiply and spread and change the world one small kindness at a time." "I miss you," I told her. "I know, but I'm not really gone. I'm here." She touched my chest right over my heart. "I'm in every woman you help, every community you build, every time you choose love over bitterness. That's immortality, little sister. That's how we live forever." I woke with tears on my face, but peace in my heart. December 14th arrived again 1 year after the anniversary dinner that had changed everything. Grace's circle was celebrating. Not the anniversary of my confrontation with Daniel, but the 1-year anniversary of our first meeting. Of Helen showing up nervously at my door. Of 5 women becoming family. The apartment was packed. We'd grown to 40 regular members now, so we'd split into 2 groups, Group A on Tuesdays, Group B on Thursdays. But today, everyone came. We squeezed into every available space, spilling onto the balcony, despite the December cold, sitting on the floor, perching on armrests. We had potluck international dishes from every culture represented in our group. Helen's arroz con gandules, Dorothy's kimchi jjigae, Nina's jollof rice, Susan's apple pie, Maria's tamales, and my contribution, Grace's famous chocolate chip cookies made from the recipe card she'd left in her kitchen drawer. We told stories, shared memories of the year, laughed until we cried. Dorothy's grandson Marcus was there, having driven up from Philadelphia. "Grandma," he said during his speech, before Mrs. Hayes started Grace's circle, "I was the grandson who video called once a week and thought that was enough. Now I visit twice a month, and I'm teaching my own kids that family means showing up, not just sending texts. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes, for teaching me that." Norma stood up next, her voice strong and clear. A year ago, I walked through that door feeling like my life was over. My son was trying to take my home. I felt powerless and scared and alone. Today, I still have my home. But more than that, I have all of you. You taught me that I'm not a burden. I'm not invisible. I matter. The room erupted in applause. I saw several women wiping tears. Then Helen stood. Charlotte, would you come here, please? Confused, I joined her at the front of the room. Helen pulled out a framed photograph. It was Grace's picture from the mantel, professionally enlarged and matted. But underneath Grace's image, they'd added words. Grace Elizabeth Hayes, 1947-2019. Teacher, sister, protector. The best inheritance we receive isn't material things. It's the courage to defend what's ours, the wisdom to use our gifts for others, and the strength to remain good even when the world is cruel. In loving memory from Grace's circle, we took up a collection. Helen explained, her voice thick with emotion. We wanted to honor the woman whose love made all this possible. We're hanging this in the reading room, so every woman who comes here will know Grace's story. I couldn't speak, could only hug Helen while tears streamed down my face. As the party continued, I slipped away to the reading room, the room that had been Grace's bedroom. I hung the photograph on the wall where she could watch over all the women who found refuge here. Look what you did, Grace, I whispered. Look at what your love created. A knock on the doorframe made me turn. A young woman stood there, maybe 32, with uncertain eyes. I'm sorry to intrude, she said. I'm Emma Chen. Helen invited me. I know I'm younger than everyone else, but my grandmother died last year, and I miss her so much. She used to talk about her circle of ladies back in Ohio. When Helen told me about this place, I thought maybe... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. But I understood immediately. I saw myself at 32, newly abandoned by Michael, lost and alone, saved by Grace's love. The circle continues. Emma, you don't need to apologize. Come here. I hugged her, this young woman who was grieving her grandmother the way I still grieved Grace. When I pulled back, I saw she was crying. I miss her so much, Emma sobbed. Nobody understands. My friends say I should be over it by now, but I'm not. I'm not over it. You don't have to be over it. Grief doesn't have a timeline. I took her hand. Come meet the others. We all miss someone. That's part of why we're here. I led Emma back to the living room. The moment we entered, the women seemed to sense her pain. Nina pulled her into a hug. Dorothy brought her tea. Susan sat beside her and held her hand. Within minutes, Emma was surrounded by women who understood loss, who'd lived through grief, who knew that sometimes the best medicine is simply being held by people who care. I watched from the doorway, my heart full. This was Grace's legacy. Not just an apartment or a trust fund or legal documents. This women supporting women, healing together, building chosen families from shared pain. That evening, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up empty plates and coffee cups, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen. We'd texted occasionally over the past year, brief, careful messages. He'd sent photos of therapy workbooks, proof of his continued sessions. I'd responded with short acknowledgments, but we hadn't spoken. Hadn't seen each other since that day in the hallway. I answered. Mom. His voice was different, steadier, more grounded. I know I said I'd wait until you were ready, but it's been a year since the anniversary dinner. A year since I destroyed everything. I'm calling because I need to tell you something, and I need to say it today. I'm listening. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. Therapy has been brutal. Dr. Wu doesn't let me make excuses or blame Victoria or pretend I was just weak. She makes me take full responsibility for every choice I made. He took a breath. I've learned that I spent my whole life trying to prove I wasn't Dad, trying to be successful enough, rich enough, important enough that no one would ever compare me to the man who abandoned us. And in doing that, I became exactly what I feared. I abandoned you in the worst possible way. I sat down on the couch, phone pressed to my ear, listening. But here's what I want to tell you, and why I needed to call today. I'm moving. Not far, just to a smaller apartment in Queens. I'm taking a pay cut at work to do something more meaningful. And I'm volunteering. At a senior center, 3 times a week. I help with technology classes, teach older adults how to use smartphones and video calls. It's my way of trying to make amends. Not to you specifically, but to the kind of people I tried to hurt. People like you. My throat tightened. I met a woman there named Mrs. Patterson, Daniel continued. She's 83. Her daughter was trying to get power of attorney to sell her house. Mrs. Patterson told me about it, and I helped her find a lawyer. I told her exactly what her daughter was planning. I gave her the resources to protect herself. Daniel, I know it doesn't make up for what I did to you. It doesn't even come close. But every time I help someone like Mrs. Patterson, I feel like maybe I'm starting to become the person Aunt Grace wanted me to be. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, waiting. I'm proud of you, I said finally, and I meant it. What you're doing, it matters. It doesn't erase the past, but it matters. Thank you. His voice cracked. That means more than you know. I don't expect us to ever be what we were. I don't expect you to invite me to holidays or call me when you need something or love me the way you used to. But maybe someday we could have coffee. Just to talk. Not as mother and son, but as two people trying to figure out if there's anything worth rebuilding. I thought about Emma showing up at my door tonight, grieving her grandmother. I thought about Norma, who'd learned to trust again after her son's betrayal. I thought about Grace, who'd believed in second chances, even while protecting me from those who didn't deserve them. Someday, I said. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, Daniel. Keep doing the work. Keep being better. And when I'm ready, I'll let you know. That's all I can ask for. Thank you, Mom, for not giving up on me completely, for leaving the door open even just a crack. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment for a long time. Could I forgive Daniel? Did I even want to? The answer I realized was complicated. I would never forget what he'd done. Never fully trust him the way I once had. Never return to that innocent mother-son relationship we'd had before Victoria, before greed, before betrayal, But perhaps with time, with consistent action, with proof that he'd truly changed, we could build something new, something honest, something real, even if it was smaller and more fragile than what we'd lost. Grace had taught me to protect myself, but she'd also taught me about love. Real love, the kind that doesn't enable or excuse, but also doesn't completely close the door to redemption. Maybe that was the final lesson, that healing wasn't about going back to what was. It was about carefully, cautiously building something new from the pieces that remained. 5 years later, Grace's circle had become something even bigger than I'd imagined. We now had 127 regular members across 4 satellite groups. Dorothy hosted one in her apartment building. Norma started one in Queens. Helen's daughter in California, inspired by her mother's transformation, started a West Coast chapter. Arthur Goldstein, now 77, volunteered as our legal advisor, helping women set up trusts and protective documents. Marcus Rodriguez, Helen's grandson, created a website and social media presence. Young people started volunteering, wanting to learn from the grandmas, as they affectionately called us. We'd helped 43 women protect their homes from predatory family members. We'd reconnected dozens of isolated elderly people with their communities. We'd created a model that was being replicated in 6 states. And through it all, Grace's photograph hung in the reading room, watching over women who needed to know they weren't invisible, weren't forgotten, weren't alone. Daniel and I had coffee 6 months after that phone call, then again 3 months later, then slowly regularly. We weren't mother and son the way we'd been, but we were something 2 people who'd hurt each other learning to be kind again. He brought Mrs. Patterson from the senior center to meet me. She joined Grace's circle and became one of our most active members. "Your son saved my home," she told me one Tuesday afternoon. "He didn't have to help me. He didn't even know me, but he helped anyway. You raised a good man, Charlotte. He made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he's trying to be better. That counts for something. It did count for something. Not everything, but something." I'm 70 years old now. My hair is completely silver. My hands have age spots that tell stories of survival. Financially, I live modestly. Grace's apartment is rent stabilized, and my Social Security covers the basics. The women in Grace's circle insist on contributing to coffee and supplies, though I never ask. But I'm happy. Genuinely deeply happy in a way I never thought possible after everything that happened, because I learned the most important lesson Grace tried to teach me. True wealth isn't in what you accumulate, it's in what you share. Not in what you keep, but in what you give. Not in the blood that binds you to people, but in the love you choose to offer. Sometimes the family you're born into betrays you, but you can always build a new family with those who choose to truly love you. And that family, the one you choose, the one you build with intention and care, that's the one that remains. Every Tuesday and Thursday when my apartment fills with laughter and conversation and the aroma of fresh coffee, I feel Grace's presence. Not as a ghost, but as a living legacy. Her love multiplied 40-fold, 80-fold, 100-fold, spreading out in ripples that touched lives we'd never meet. The greatest revenge against those who try to destroy you isn't returning their darkness. It's building something so beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal that their shadows can never touch your light. That's what Grace taught me. That's what I'm teaching others. And that's the inheritance I'll leave behind when my time comes, not property or money, but the knowledge that you are strong enough to defend what's yours, wise enough to use your gifts for others, and brave enough to remain good, even when the world is cruel. Because we all deserve to be protected, valued, and loved. And if our own blood won't give us that, we have the right and the power to build it for ourselves. Grace knew that, and now so do I. The end.